Hey folks, if we haven't met before, my name is Patrick. I'm the pastor here at North Decatur, and I'm excited to join with you as we continue to read through the book of Acts. This week, we are on the 16th chapter in the book of Acts, which is a really fun, very full chapter in the book. There's a lot in there, and actually, if you haven't been staying, if this is the first time you're tuning in with us and you haven't necessarily been reading along with us, I would definitely recommend that you at least look back to the 15th chapter with the Jerusalem Council and Paul and everybody sort of wrestling through how this new movement will be attached or not attached to some of the ancient and long held beliefs and rules and structure around the religious community. So it's important to look back only because it helps us to understand a little bit about what's happening in this chapter. The very first thing we see is Paul choose a new person to join him in traveling around a new area that he hasn't been yet. And he chooses this guy named Timothy. And the first thing we hear about Timothy is that, one, he's well respected. His family, his mom is Jewish, his dad is Greek. And then it says that Paul had Timothy circumcised, which, if you know anything about Paul, is kind of crazy. Every time he's been in front of the Jerusalem Council, anytime he's had a conversation with James or Peter or anybody that's a part of the Jerusalem Council, he has advocated strongly for the Greek folks who are joining this religious community, this faith community. He advocates for them to not need to follow all of the laws of Torah. And he advocates that they shouldn't need to be circumcised. He advocates that they shouldn't need to follow all of the food laws. He advocates that they should be able to embody their faithfulness in a way that is true in their own culture, because Christ transcends and transforms all of it. And Christ embodies this Torah. And so if we're faithful to Christ, then that is the primary mark of the covenant that we share with God. But with Timothy, he changes that, which is really interesting. And then a similar sort of tension shows up later in the chapter when Timothy and Paul and some of their other companions start to be followed around by this little girl who is a slave and who's possessed by a spirit that can foretell the future. And she starts following Paul and Timothy and the others around town, shouting, essentially, these men are here proclaiming a new king, and they're leading the way to your salvation. And she's just like constantly pointing. And Paul gets so frustrated that he turns around and, out of annoyance, casts this spirit out of this little girl. And that is the thing that puts him in jail. This girl's parents or owners, or however the relationship is, lose their capacity to make money off of this little girl. And so she calls on the Roman authority to have Paul and his companions locked up for inciting some sort of religious revolt, which is all kind of crazy, right? So Paul's whole thing is advocating for the inclusion of Greek folks without them needing to conform to customs and way of life. And his whole thing is proclaiming the risen Christ. And both of those things are put into tension in the 16th chapter, which really just means that we should pay particular attention about why and what might be happening in it. And we're going to talk a lot about that this week. Edry, Tyler, Brittany, Rachel, everybody's going to be working through a different piece of it, so I won't even dive into the details of each of those moments. But it does make me wonder, because I think this is where Paul's coming from, it does make me wonder, how do we prioritize our actions based on our value set, based on our beliefs, right? Paul, in both of these cases, has to decide how to act, right? His primary goal is to spread the news of Jesus Christ to all of the Gentile communities around, extending from the ancient Middle East and Near East all the way up to Spain is where he eventually wants to get. And in each of those places, he's met with some resistance. Some of that resistance is Roman, Some of that resistance is Jewish and Hebrew. And in every place, he has to sort of balance his proclamation of the gospel with the community response to it. And that means he has to be mindful about the ways that he enters into community. And the same thing is true with the girl later, and it's the same thing that's true with the woman Lydia that I believe Tyler will be talking about this week, who is a dyer of cloth and who converts, and her whole family converts, and she sort of becomes the lead figure of this church in Philippi, which is beautiful, and also challenges the notion that women shouldn't be leaders in church, which of course they should. But anyway, that's another point for another day. But what Paul's main thing seems to be is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ as the new king for all people, not just the Hebrew people, but for all of the world. And because of that fundamental claim, that absolute truth, he has to make accommodations around some of his ethical choices in order to allow space for people's lived experiences wherever they are. So Timothy has to be circumcised so that the kind of resistance that they get when they go into communities that are primarily Jewish isn't about the stupid things, but is instead about the content of the fundamental message. It would be silly for a community to reject the message of the risen Christ because, well, the person who gave it wasn't circumcised, so what could they know? So Paul meets that on the front end, knowing that some people are still in that stage of life, that stage of their religious upbringing, which is totally fine. And I think for us, that means that we have to be able to take a step back and ask ourselves the question, what is the main thing? What is the thing that I am most concerned about? And then what might I let go of? What might I hold loosely in order to pursue that vision with more clarity and greater drive and the greater potential for it to be successful? We have to hold some things lightly so that we can walk forward boldly. Anyway, I would love to know what those things are. What is your main thing, and what might you be holding lightly these days, especially in a season of pandemic? You can drop that in the comments below the video. If you know somebody who'd be interested in joining us in this walk through Acts, just please do share this video with them. We'd love to get to know them, and I'd love to get to know you better. Anyway, hope you're well, and I look forward to talking to you online. Take care. Bye.